All right. So I'm Matt, and I'm going to be presenting this workshop with James Biggins and Fong Nguyen, and they're both in the meeting right now as well. And we're all mentors here at the XR Club. So we're going to be going over getting started with virtual reality using Unity's new XR interaction toolkit, which I'm not sure if any of you have prior experience with doing VR in Unity, but they've made it a lot easier. Like, not that it was super difficult to begin with, but some things were, and it's a lot easier now.
I would just take this opportunity to say that this workshop does go with the assumption that you either went to our prior workshop on Intro to Unity, or if you've used the tool before. Also, we put in the Discord before that you don't need a VR headset or any other device to go through that tutorial. If you want to follow along with me, I'll interject occasionally with the additional steps that you'll need to do to set up a simulator when it comes to that. I think those are the two things that I have.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, Fong, do you want to start with going through the basic setup of the project and everything, and then I can, at the end, I'll go through the extra stuff I added to the itinerary, and then Biggins, you can go through the simulation stuff.
Let me just share.
But we'll start with just general setup, I think.
So yeah, if you got Unity ready, then just open it. As for me, I'm using Unity Hub because I have several different versions of Unity, and the version we're using for this project is Unity 2019.4.11 long-term support. So yeah, you would just click on new, this arrow right here. If you have multiple versions, click on it. Name it whatever you want. Like I'm just gonna make it name workshop, and make sure you choose the 3D version because we're gonna make a 3D VR game. And click create, and just wait for Unity to just do its thing.
While this is getting set up, did anyone fall behind on that first step or have any questions so far? This is just
if anyone wants me to slow down, just say something.
Yeah, feel free to put messages in the chat too.
And we are recording at this point, right?
Yeah.
All right, but
Yeah, if it tells you to update, you can just skip it if you want. All right. Okay, so here we have the scene view, the game view, the inspector, and the hierarchy, which is like the 4 that we're gonna use for this project. So what I'm gonna instruct you guys to make is like a simple VR shooting game where you can just like pick up the gun and just like kind of shoot out bullets. So first of all, you should make like, can anyone like tell me again about the VR setup again?
Herbert, do you want to do this one?
Yeah, I think we're going to Windows Package Manager.
Oh, you asked? Yeah. Yeah, Package Manager.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, make sure you're in the Unity registry part, and you're gonna want to add the I think it's called the XR plugin management, right? And you want to install that.
Yes, and there's also going to be one other package you need, which is the XR Interaction Manager Toolkit itself. However, that one is a preview package.
Right. Is that the one in the asset store?
That's where you go to Advanced.
Oh, right. Yeah, you go to Advanced.
Show preview packages.
Show preview packages.
Yeah.
And it should be here. Yeah, it should be a preview version. I'm not going to install it because I have a VR headset. So,
Oh, no, you need that.
oh, I need that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know how to use this. So,
This is what we use. That's what you use to make the.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think you
bought
use it without knowing it.
I haven't bought it though. So is that okay? Is that okay? Crap. Okay. So yeah, it should be done. And after you install those two packages, just yeah, these two, you can go back to your scene view and you can right click the hierarchy, go to XR and add a room scale XR rig. And you're going to see like a box with green lines and a camera in the middle. That is your VR camera. And this is like essentially represents the space that you're going to move in. So the next step is you're going to make a like a ground so that you
Can I
can
interject here real quick?
yeah.
So two things. One, to give people who have slower laptops a chance to catch up right now, because that was a lot of downloading. And just to briefly touch on the different types of things that you'll see in that XR tab when you right click on the hierarchy. All of these do different things within the XR space, but the easiest way to think of it is when you work in VR, it's very, very different than using Unity's just normal 3D objects, because in like normal 3D, if you're just making a video game in either 2D or 3D, you can have things like text or things like even to an extent materials show up and be done a certain way. But with XR, there's normally a way that you're supposed to do it that's specific to XR. And so you'll see things like UI canvas or different like ray casting things, which is all different tools. Additionally, with the other XR rig, the stationary XR rig, if you have like a certain VR headset that doesn't have 6 degrees of freedom, so essentially the first 3 degrees of freedom are for you to like rotate your headset, and the other 3 degrees of freedom are you to move around in 3D space. And if you don't have an XR headset that utilizes that, there are some cases where you'd only want to use the stationary XR rig.
Yeah, so an example of that would be like any kind of type of Google Cardboard sort of thing where you're just putting a phone on your face.
Yeah, so you can't move around in that case. So you only have 3 degrees of freedom.
All right. I think that should give them enough time to download everything. Continue.
Yeah. And yeah, I kind of skipped over a step that we need. So before, well, you can do it now, but you can go to Edit and Project Settings. And you will see something like this. And yeah, mine is already there, but at the end, there should be like a tab called XR Plugin Management, and you want to click on the platform, like the headsets that you're going to use with this program.
So yeah, so if you don't have a headset, you're not going to click anything, just to be clear.
Yeah, so if you have one, mine is Oculus. You just click on that. It'll just download all the dependencies that you are going to use.
But for people who are following along with me and using simulators, do not click anything. We'll handle that. We'll handle that later.
Yeah. So this is only for people who have a VR headset. All right. Right. So after you create an XR rig, it's going to look like this. And there are like 4 children of it. Then there's like the left hand and the right hand. And these are essentially a game objects that represents your hands when you play the game, and you can like put stuff in there and interact with it. And yeah, so you have the room scale XR rig or the stationary one, depending on the one that you choose. And you're going to want to make like a ground. So in this case, I'm going to use a 3D cube. So you right click here, 3D object, cube, and you're going to see a cube. I'm going to go to transform, reset its position, and I'm going to flatten it out a little bit. I'm going to make this a little bit, yeah. And that is just the transform. the scale of the. I'm just changing the scale of the cube to make it flat, like a ground surface, so that you have like a sense of groundness when you are playing in VR. So now that you have a ground, we're going to get started on. You don't have the left-hand controller or right-hand control. What are you using for your XR rig? Mine is I go to the XR auto simulation. Do you need the XR rig if you're using the simulation?
Wait, I can answer this one right now. So if you're using like the simulation package that we've downloaded from like the website that we suggested, or you downloaded from the asset store, I'll go over how to link that together. But just follow along with everything, even if you're using the simulation, follow along with everything he's saying so far, and I'll interject in the cases where it's different. For people, if you're jumping ahead, there's basically 2 prefabs, and I'll show you how to link the prefabs together.
Okay, so if you don't have the, if you're using the simulation, you can skip the XR rig, and
No,
you can.
do not skip it.
You have to do it.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'll tell you when things are different.
All right, so yeah, you go to right click on the hierarchy, go to XR, and get the room scale XR rig. Right, so after you have the ground, you can rename it so that you can keep track of other stuff in the scene, because it can get very large very quickly. We're gonna get started on the making the shooting game. So the first thing in the game is you need a gun, and I'm gonna make a really simple gun so that you can just do it. And I'm gonna make an empty game object. I'm gonna name it the gun. And this object essentially doesn't have anything, and you can see it on the scene right here. And I'm going to create 2 cubes under it. So you right click on the gun object, you go to 3D object, you make a cube, and yeah, you just adjust it so that you can see it. And I'm going to scale it down, essentially. Yes. Like that. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So that until you just play around with it until it looks like a gun. That's it. Yeah, remember to put everything under the gun game object, because we want everything to be one master object. Excuse me, I don't have very good. I'm just making things. Okay. Gonna zero this out. Oh my God, where's this going? Yeah, you're going to have to play around with the camera and like the positioning a little bit, because it's sometimes very hard to get an accurate perspective. Right. Yeah. So that's my gun. And I'll make it. If you don't want to go through this hassle, you can just download a gun model and import it into Unity. Right. Yeah, so it more or less looks like a gun. And so if you are for the people who wants to do this later and like just importing the gun model from that you can found outside, be sure to add a box collider component to both the objects, or at least like make it cover the object. So you can see like the green lines covering the gun outside. Yeah, so the box collider component essentially makes it so that whenever you want to interact with the gun, your hand or your VR hand can detect the gun and pick it up. So you want it to be the same shape as the gun, and you can do it like using the add component button, and just types in box collider, and there you have it.
Yeah, so each of those cubes that you add should by default have a box collider.
Right, and yeah, this is just for people who want to use their own models.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Yeah. And last of all, you want to go to the gun master object, and you want to add another component, which is the rigid body. And don't add the 2D one because this is a 3D game. And the rigid body component essentially makes it that physics is applied to the game. So if you don't have this, and when you play the game, the gun will just float just like that. But if you have this, it will fall to the ground and interact with other objects just like normal. Right. And after you add the rigid body component, you want to add something called the XR grab interactable object. And this is a script that Unity made. So you will have it when you import all the libraries that will allow your hand controllers, these two, to grab the gun. And after you add this component, you want to pay attention to this field called attach transform. So this field will tell Unity what object to grab when you want to grab this gun. And in this case, you will just drag the object itself, the gun object itself, pull it and drag it into this field, and you will have it. So at this point, I think you can just test it. Sorry, I'm gonna
jump in super quick here. This isn't something that's different for simulation, guys. This is just like for people newer to Unity. What he's did right there by dragging and dropping is by essentially editing a script that will be run on runtime.
Right.
Underneath the very top, kind of grayed out. But you can think of these as like public variables or something like that that you can interact with before the games actually run. You could actually hard code these in as well. It doesn't make a difference, but that's what he's doing. And that's how you link the script to the 3D objects that you have in your hierarchy.
Yeah.
Right.
One other note is with the XR grab interactable component, if you do forget to drag in the attach transform, it will just by default go for the transform attached to its own game object.
Yeah. But if you want to grab something else, you want to grab that object into this field. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
do we want to break here and just see where everybody's at real quick?
Right. I'm just gonna play the game and like show people what it looks like.
So people with simulations right now, this should not actually do anything. Don't worry about it. I'll get there. So you will not see red things. You won't see any of this. You should just see like a gun and a cube on the ground.
Oops. Yeah, so the gun is rotating the wrong way right now. So can anyone see what I'm seeing?
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah, so the gun has physics. It falls to the ground. And what the room scale VR XR rig by default has two rays like this, like pointing from your hand. So it's kind of like a gun with like a laser pointer, laser sight. And when you have that sight, that line interacts with any object that has the grabbable script, it'll turn white. And if you have a headset, you click the middle trigger, it'll fly to your hand, and you can just like grab it, play with it, throw it away, just like that, just like the physics object. And the reason that the gun is rotating the wrong way is because whenever the object is being grabbed by the hand, its rotation will reset to 0. So I don't know if it's like we have enough time. We talk about rotations right now, but if it like rotates the wrong way, just play around with it in the editor until it rotates the right way.
And by play around with it, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But for this simple example, I think the easiest thing is just move that square to the other side and call it a day. But you have more complicated solutions if you're looking at more complicated.
Yeah, I think generally the blue arrow that we see in the transform, when you click it on the master gun object, because I'm using a local, the local transform, is to move the second one so that it points towards the blue arrow. So it should be like this. So you should see the blue arrow like this. All right, let me see.
Okay, at this point, should I go on?
Yep.
What are the steps for the simulation people?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great. I'm gonna share screen then and overwrite you there.
Yeah, real quick, where's everybody at? You want to shout out like how, or put in the chat, like how are you caught up to this? Do you have the gun in your scene? Do you have the XR rig in your hierarchy? All right, Henry's all good. See if it's still making the gun. All good with Liam.
God, don't fail me now.
All right, so it seems, yeah, is anybody not all good?
Oh, remember to save your projects frequently, everyone. Like
Good.
Unity can crash anytime.
This is very true.
All right, yeah, if nobody has any objection, then yeah, Biggins, if you want to.
Okay, so the first thing to do here is actually get the simulator tool. I'm going to walk through how to do that in case any of you guys haven't already done that beforehand. It's found on the Asset Store, and you can just search for it by typing in something like, yeah, you can see that VR simulator, but I think the full name is XR Interaction Toolkit VR Simulator. And this is what it looks like. So it's $5, so not the end of the world. Before anyone buys it, I'll be honest, it's not great. It's very okay, and it's a little bit frustrating to use. But at the end of the day, you're kind of getting away with not paying a couple $100 for a VR headset. So my recommendation for this is I would recommend it if your eventual goal is to get your hands on some hardware, either through the club or for buying it on your own. But this isn't really sustainable for a lot of projects, but for this project, I think it'll do just fine. So you want to import / buy that one. It might redirect you to like a web page if you need to buy that. And unfortunately, I don't know if we have time to wait for everyone to kind of buy it on their own. So I'm going to just assume that everyone's bought it. All you really need to do is import this in. This dialog, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if it matters, but what I did and what works every time is if you install upgrade. The downside about this is it's going to have you reset Unity like twice during this process, which depending on how fast your computer is going to take a little bit of time. You could try skipping it, but I don't know if that'll work for sure. So we're going to reset it. And to be honest with you, I'm not really sure what this does, but I think it has to do with how your input is handled. And this package specifically deals with keyboard input. And so it kind of needs to be reconfigured, I think, in your package settings. This will also have to reset this as well. And I think this is what actually crashes or resets the client. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So don't worry, this is annoying, but it happens. Alrighty. And so the kind of unfortunate thing is, although we hit import, we didn't actually import it because the thing reset before we could actually import it. So that means you have to go back to the asset store and find that simulator thing again. And hopefully your scene and everything else has been configured so that you don't have to restart your client again. But once you have everything set up, you're going to hit import. It's going to do the exact same thing, but this time, since we already installed and upgraded, I hit skip the second time. And at this point, you should see a little pop-up window of all of the things that it's trying to import. Can I get a quick check of how everyone's computers are doing? This really comes down to how fast your computer is. So I don't know how mine ranks nowadays. So just let me know if everyone's at this step or still on the loading screen. Either unmute yourself or put in the chat if you're caught up or still working, just so I can get a handle. So you can come back and finish in your own time. I'm going to assume that
That's the plan.
In the dock.
Thanks, Brian, for taking one for the team there. So I'm going to hit import, and you can see it appear in your packages down here once it actually gets going. And so there we go. I'm going to go back to my scene view. That's my gun and my little cube. So at this point, the really main things that we're looking at is the simulator and the simulator XR rig. Actually not technically, you can drag in the simulator XR rig and have that work and not even use this as XR rig. The problem that I ran into is those little red lines that showed you where you were pointing don't appear. So it was really hard to figure out like where you were aiming your gun. So that's why we're going to drag in the simulator prefab. And at this point, you should see some of all this fields right here. And now we have these two different prefabs in your hierarchy. And the main thing that we're going to want to do here is under camera offset in the XR rig, you're going to find left-hand controller and right-hand controller. And you can see right here, there's a left hand and right hand. And using the same drag and drop method that we talked about before, you're going to link those and also the XR rig main object. So this really syncs the simulation for what you're doing. So the nice thing about this simulation is you can basically, if you ever get your hands on like an XR device, you can just delete this, check the Oculus integration in the player settings and be good to go. And that's why this is going to end up being a little bit crazy. So I'm going to play this. I honestly don't know what's going to happen. But we're going to see here. Okay, so that's cool. You can see that there's two red lines. You can see that physics acted on this object right here. And you can see a bunch of these controls. I'm going to test moving forward right here, and my input is not set up, which reminds me of the other thing that we're supposed to do right here. I think that if you go into your player settings again, which I got to through a kind of roundabout way here. But if you go down to player settings, other settings, and this is here, Graber, right? I'm not going crazy. Oh yeah.
I think it was around there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's here. It's here. But in your project settings under player settings, you're going to want to hit both here, and that's fortunately going to have to restart everything, which you absolutely love to see. But the nice thing about this is our script will work after that. Make sure you save your changes. I don't know if that's on the docs, Graber.
It is. It was a little. Okay. I just clarified it in the doc. Yeah.
All right. This is the second time you'll have to restart everything. It is the last time you'll have to restart everything. So we're on the home stretch here. That was a great time to put something in the chat if I went a little bit too fast there. If you need to find where player settings are, because it's kind of weird to get to, or if you're just stuck on any other step here. Cool wallpaper. Thank you. All right. So now at this point, we should have both checked here. And we should be good to go. So now if we close this window and hit play, we should be able to move around. And you can see if I move my mouse around.
Oh, there's a question in the chat.
Oh, where do I find the player settings? Excellent question. I kind of showed that off screen. So if you go to edit project settings, this is the fastest way, and then player, there's settings, and then both. So that again, that's edit, project settings, player settings, other settings, and then both. Is that what you're seeing on your end, Liam? Awesome. Yeah. So I think you're gonna have to do that reset, which sucks, but after that, you should be able to follow along. Cool. So as I was mentioning, as Liam's computer restarts again, you can look around a little bit up and down. And although the red lines don't look like you're moving, the important thing to look to know when you're looking at the simulator is your head is actually completely controlled to your mouse. So if you're looking up, down, left, right, that is the headset moving, but not your hand controllers. To move your hand controllers, you have to deal with this kind of confusing and very awkward setting because turns out it's pretty hard to get 3 degrees of freedom easily. So the first thing that we can do is obviously WASD moves you around, but also I didn't like their default bindings with mouse 1 and mouse 0. In fact, I didn't really feel like they actually did anything. So I'm going to give you a recommendation to go in the simulator object right here. Go and expand assign keys and interaction keys. And we're going to change the select and activate. So for select, I found it was pretty easy to have it on tab. And for activate, I think I put it as the space bar. And I think this just makes your life a little bit easier when you move around. So this next part is a little bit complicated, but see if you can follow along as best as you can. So as you can kind of see as I'm mousing through this, you can see it turning white, and that just shows you that you're mousing over something that is interactable. So if we mouse over it and then hit our select button, which I just rebound a tab, you can see that the gun just flies over to your hand. And if you press and hold that down, just like you would hold down like the grab button on your controller, you can see you got it in your hand and now you got a gun. You can move around with it, pressing the WASD, again, holding that tab button and moving the camera around and holding the tab button here. So that's kind of cool. You can put the gun down. But what happens if you want to choose or select something here, like from this object, the gun's out of reach. So now here's where the hard part gets. To toggle our controller on and off, you hit the G button. And as you can see, you immediately be able to move around where your hand is. So if you want, your hand can be in any of these positions right here. And that way you can like raise it up, down, left, or right. But again, it's all in like a 2-dimensional plane of moving up, down, left, right. If you wanted to move the angle of which you're pointing it, you're going to have to toggle the rotation. So then if you hit the R button, now when you go up, down, left, right, you're toggling the rotation of this. So again, that's normal G to toggle the like position and hold down R to toggle the rotation. As you can see, you can rotate that guy down to grab the controller, hit tab, and now you're able to grab that. I made this look not too terribly, but you can ask Matt and Fong, and it took me a solid like 20 minutes to get that working where it looked not terrible. As you can see, if I'm trying to like rotate down there, I'm having a little bit of trouble just getting myself over there. Like it's a little difficult. So a lot of times you might have to like if you press G and then hit R again to not toggle the rotation, to move this guy to like an easier position right here, and then hit R again to change the rotation to something easier. So my like pro tip there is get your position first like set up and then worry about your rotation. You might be able to see just by looking at the document or right here that you're also able to switch hands. So you can switch hands and do the exact same thing on either hand. And if you just don't want to see these grid lines anymore, you press G and now you don't have to see all that stuff. And then again, hitting tab to grab the gun and moving it around. And the last couple thing, you have a reset button. So if you just screw everything up, which I did many times, you have your reset button there. At this point, again, you can tell it's not great, but it does work, and you can get a hang of it. And I promise that if you just play around with it, like learning a video game, you kind of get a sense for it. So it's only $5, and it does let you kind of work with this like system, I guess, and practice making VR things, which is pretty cool. It takes out of game mode. I always press the Windows button, and there we're out of here. Any questions by anybody? Okay, this is a kind of like crucial part of like for all the people that don't have an Oculus or some sort of HMD and VR setup. So if you have any questions, just like find me somewhere, Discord, email, however you can contact me, and I'll try to help you as best I can. I've thought about trying to change the system to make a better script, but honestly, I don't know how it would make it better. So on that note, Fong, back to you to get us shooting the gun.
All right, thank you. All right. Yep. So now that we make the gun, we can start making the other part of the gun, which is the bullets. So the bullet is, I try to keep it simple. You just make a sphere by going to the hierarchy, right click, 3D object, and sphere. And yeah, you will have a very big sphere. We'll scale it down by like 1/10. This looks reasonable. And it doesn't matter where you put the sphere is because, I'm gonna name it bullet. And I'm gonna add a component, the rigid body component, so that we will have physics for this for the bullet. You can play around with the mass if you want later, if the bullet is kind of too heavy or something, which is what I'll do now. I'll just decrease the mass by 10, and that should be it for the bullet. And one important thing that you have to do is you have to go to the hierarchy, click on the bullet, and drag it down to your assets tab, which is usually down in the bottom. And you'll see something like this. So what this makes is it makes the bullet that you created a prefab. Essentially, it says it right here. And you will see that the bullet that you make inside of the hierarchy will turn blue. This means that you can spawn as many bullets as you like, and they'll always be identical. And you don't have to make a new bullet every time you want to shoot something. And you can go ahead and delete all the bullets. And so another thing that I have to make is to go back to the gun. This time you have to specify where the bullets is going to spawn when it was created, so that you don't want the bullets to be created at here and it will just like shoot you in the back of your hand. And you're going to make a new empty game object under the gun object, and you're going to move it to the front. So yeah, just kind of put it right there. And I'm gonna name it a bullet spawn, so that I'll know that this is where the bullets will spawn. And we're getting to the fun part, which is scripting. So I'm gonna go ahead and go back to the master gun object, click add component. I'm gonna make a new script called shoot. You just kind of like type it into here, and like there will be an option called new script, or you can just go to the assets part and go right click, create, C# script. Like any part of it is, any process is fine, but if you do make it in the assets, you'll have to, oh, okay, gonna delete that. Sorry. Yeah, I have to name it. Gonna make a shoot script. So yeah, go back to your gun and drag the shoot script. Oh, no, go to your bullet spawn and drag your shoot script there into the inspector. So you're gonna see a component inside the bullet spawn inspector. And you're going to open up the script. And by default, Unity is going to create the start and the update methods for you. And these are the two most important methods in C# in Unity scripting. But we're not going to use this for now, so you can just go ahead and delete it. So to shoot a bullet, you're going to need a reference to a bullet prefab. So you can do that by writing public game object and naming it the bullet prefab or something, right? So if you write this and you save your script, and you can go back to Unity and it'll compile, and you will see a field named bullet prefab right there. So you can drag your bullets that you made in the assets folder and drag it into here. So now you will have a reference to your bullet. And okay. So does everyone following along? Is anyone falling behind? Okay. All right. So after you've done that, okay. Yeah. So after that, you're going to need to specify the speed that the bullet is going to fly at. So I'm going to make a float called bullet speed, and I'm going to say the default is 10. The F is just the floating point numbers if you are going to use floats. And now we're going to make a new function or a method called shoot bullet. So whenever we want to shoot a bullet, we're going to have whatever triggers the firing, call this function. And we're going to essentially spawn a new bullet by calling instantiate. So this is a Unity static function that will spawn whatever objects that we have a reference to. In this case, is the bullet prefab into the Unity scene. But it's going to spawn at a random location with random rotations. So we're going to force the bullet for so we're going to force its position to be at the location we specified by accessing the transform component and the position component of the bullet game object. So this is all inherent from all game objects. And we're going to make it stay at transform position. So the transform position is a property of the, where is it? Oh, there you go. Of the bullet spawn object. So we're essentially saying that we want this bullet to spawn at the location of the bullet spawn. So all the bullets will spawn right here. And after that, we just need to, because our bullet has physics from the rigid body component, we can just go bullet get component. Let me not make a typo here. Rigid body and add force transform forward times bullet speed. Right. So the get component is another function inherits to all game objects that will essentially get that component, in this case the rigid body, from the game object. And because the game object, the rigid body component has the function called add force, which will add force to a rigid body component at the using like a direction vector. So direction vector, it will add force in the direction of that direction vector, and the magnitude of that vector will be the amount of force that will be added to that game object. So that's why we have this bullet speed to adjust the magnitude. And the transform forward is essentially the blue arrow of the bullet spawn. So it will always return the forward direction of this game object. And now we can, that is all for the scripting. So we can just save that and go back to the editor.
You got a typo on your transform. I think you wrote transform.
All right. Yeah, so my VS Code is like acting weirdly with Unity, so it doesn't linting properly. Right. So if you play the game right now, it'll just not do anything because the function that we made is not being called by anything. So you want to go back to your master gun object. And back at the XR graph interactable component, you'll see at the very end an interactable events, right? So this will like list all the kinds of events which will correspond to all the buttons on your controllers that will be activated when you press that button. So we will want to have our trigger shoot the bullet. So that will be unactivate. We will press this like the plus button, and we will pull the bullet spawn into that part. We'll call the function from the script shoot, and we will call the shoot bullet function. And that should be it. And to test it out, we'll just go back into the play mode. And like just grab the gun and like shoot it. So right now the amount of force that we have is way too small. We can just like increase it. Let's make this 50.
Can I get on my soapbox real quick?
Yeah.
So one of my Unity pet peeves that it's no worries if you're new to Unity, but like if you're doing stuff in industry and academia, some people might kind of look at you the wrong way for this. But as you guys saw, the reason he was able to edit those fields, the speed and the object of the gun field and the inspector, was that they were like public fields. And if you've taken any programming classes, or even if you haven't, one of the biggest things is you're not supposed to make anything public that doesn't have to be public. And for something like the gun speed, that's definitely something that doesn't need to be public. And so if you wanted to kind of clean this up a little bit, obviously this is just a tutorial, but for doing good practices, you can make a field or an instance variable serialized. And you can Google that if you want, but essentially you put a square bracket and put the word serialized above, and it keeps it private and also shows it in the inspector. So that's like the way that quote unquote you're supposed to do it going forward. But no worries for simple tutorials. It's sometimes easier just to say.
Yeah. So the Unity works is kind of different from normal programming. Yeah. And as you can see, like now our gun can like interacts with other objects. Our bullets also can interact with other objects. And we have like the bullet arc because all our bullets have physics and it can interact with other stuff. So yeah, that's the end of my part. So if anyone has a question. Oh, sorry. So go to for Brian, the balls do not despawn. So you're going to have to despawn the bullets by itself. By the way I like to do it is just to add another script to the bullet called like despawn that will essentially despawn when after it hits something, or like despawn after like 5 seconds, so that the game doesn't lag as the game go on. And the function that you're supposed to put on the activate event is the shoot bullet function, the one that you made.
So I think what he's referring to is if you just want to go back and like show him the inspector view of that, but first you have to drag over the object and then you have to select the function within that object.
Right, you have to drag over the function that you put the script on right here. And you drag it on to the on activate. Yeah, so you have the bullet spawn object right there. You see it. If you click on it, it'll highlight whatever object it's put on. And you go to the shoot and shoot bullet. So shoot is the name of the class that you made, and shoot function is the name of the function that you made.
Liam, did you make the method public? Yeah, okay. Also, one other aside for my simulation people, as you saw from the interaction keys that we were able to do using the simulation object, there's only really two things that it looks like we can simulate at this time, and that's select and activate. So select by default is set to like picking up that object, but activate's really the only other thing you're looking for. So just as Fong was showing you, you could choose a bunch of those functions to put the script under. For our simulation people, you really have to put it under the activate. That's really the only option.
Could be over the part where you made the bullet object blue in the hierarchy. Okay, so the way that I make the bullet object blue is because I make any game object, like I can make a cube and I just drag it on to the assets tab. So you'll see that the object turns blue in the hierarchy. And the way that you can make as many bullets as you want is from the scripting, which is this part, which is the instantiate. So whenever you call the shoot bullet function, yeah, it'll just instantiate a new game object. You attach the shoot script to the game object you drag over.
Doesn't reply to Liam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just going into the project or your assets, dragging over the C# script and dragging it on. It doesn't really matter, I guess, what you drag it on, but whatever you drag it on, that's what you need to put in the XRig.
Right.
All right. Yeah. So I mean, if we're all set with the gun stuff, I can go over some of the teleportation and the other option for hand interactions real quick if we want, because I think this was scheduled to go till 7:15. If people are up for that. Oh, Liam says he can see the shoot options now that he dragged it into bullet spawn object, but he doesn't see the function. Yeah, if the function's public and you saved your script and there's no compile errors with the script, then there's no reason it shouldn't show up.
Why don't we move on, and you can stay with us at the end, and you can share a screen, and we can figure it out at the end. But let's finish it off.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, if people are good with me going over some other fun teleportation stuff, and then I'll start sharing my screen right now. Screen share. All right. Yeah. So you all see my Unity project here?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So this is actually just, I didn't make this right now. Fong made this when we were planning, but it's the same deal here, except we got a fancier looking gun. And I guess, yeah, the first thing I'll go over is teleportation. So this is all in the document that we shared toward the bottom of the document. But it's pretty simple and straightforward. So let me, yeah, okay. So first thing you need to do is on the XR rig game object, we're going to add a new component, and this component is going to be called the teleportation provider. And then we're going to, you see how it says we need a locomotion system. So we're going to add one of those to this as well. Both of these on the XR rig parent game object. And then these are both set to nothing right now. I think they'll populate themselves when you hit play, but otherwise you can just drag them in because this is for its own XR rig. So we really just want these to reference itself, its own game object. So yeah, once we have that done, next thing we're going to do is the way teleportation works, general area teleportation is you specify the collider on which you can teleport to. And okay, this is hard to explain, but basically we have this ground. This is our plane, or it might be a cube that's very flat. In our case, it's a plane here. It'll work for anything with a collider though. And all we have to do really is, as if it's got a collider, which this one does, we just add a teleportation area component. And if you look at this, it looks very similar to what we have on our gun object, the grab interactable with our interactable events. All of these same events are on the teleportation area script. So you can make use of these if you would like to. However, we don't even need to get that complicated. All we really need to do is, if we feel like it, is add a custom reticle. So what a custom reticle does is when you point your ray from your controller to the collider on which you can teleport, it'll render an object at the end of that ray to show you where you're going to end up. So a very simple one we can make is if we just create a sphere. I'm just going to reset the position here. Maybe I'll scale it down. I'll make it look like that. It's kind of weird looking sphere, but yeah. And then we can create a new material just so that it looks a little bit, pops out at us a little bit more. I call this pink, and I'm going to make it pink. And then we can apply that material just by dragging it directly onto the game object there. And so yeah, and then like we did before with the bullet, we're going to make this sphere a prefab by just dragging it to the assets folder, just like that. And then I'm going to delete it from the hierarchy. And now that it's in our assets folder, if we go back to ground, then go back to our custom reticle field, just drag it in. And now we have a custom reticle. However, there's one other thing that we need to make sure about this sphere. And that is that it cannot have a sphere collider. If you do, then it will try to instantiate the sphere on top of, like, within your the surface that you're teleporting within, and it's going to get all upset because you're saying it has to be inside the thing, but they both have colliders and it's trying to collide, and it's going to freak out at you. So just remove the collider and you'll be all good if you're using a sphere like that. So now I believe If I hit play, let me save this and hit play. I got to put on my headset over here. Where's my? Yeah. So yeah, there's our reticle. As you can see, we got these pink spheres appearing at the end of our beams whenever we contact the teleportation surface, which is in this case the plane. And then if we point the beams away from the surface, we're no longer in contact. The reticle goes away. And now if I squeeze the trigger or the grab button here, I can teleport to wherever I point. And now I can get around. So in your case, since you're using the simulation thing that Biggins went over, you can actually move around with WASD just by walking. And I can walk too when I'm wearing the headset, but I can only go so far before I hit a wall in the real world. So that's why you need teleportation. Whereas in your case, you might not see the need. But if you're making an application that you do intend for people with VR headsets to use, you're going to want some form of teleportation to get around if you intend for the person to be able to get around within the scene.
And if any of you guys are XR nerds, this is where the 6 degrees of freedom comes from. The fact that the HMD or head-mounted display, that headset that you're using, can technically track your movement forward or back within the play area. And so that's how they claim it's 6 degrees of freedom, even though the 3 degrees of freedom of your own player movement is very limited. But if you've ever played Beat Saber, you know that if you like kind of duck down, it like ducks you down too. So that's kind of how it ties in.
Watch as I get on the ground.
That was important.
Yeah, so that's basically teleportation. There's one other variant with teleportation I'll mention real quick, and that is, let's say you want the person. See, so we're giving them a lot of the player gets a lot of freedom here because we're saying you can teleport to any location on this plane you want. So let's say we have this cube, and where is it? Oh yeah, and we're gonna put it over here, and we want the player to teleport directly right on top of the cube and nowhere else when they point at the cube. So what we can do is add the teleportation anchor component, which is extremely similar to the teleportation area component. When the only difference is that there's an extra field here, which is called the teleport anchor transform. And this is where you will end up when you teleport when you select this cube as a teleportation thing. So I'm just going to create a child of this cube, and I'm going to move this child up to around the top of the cube, and then I will drag this child's transform into this field. And now, as you can see, this blue box here, this is our teleportation destination from the anchor. It has raised up to the location of this child.
You went through those steps really quick for someone who hasn't
Yeah.
Do you want to do those one more time?
Yeah. So it's basically the same deal as with the ground, or the teleportation area script where you can point anywhere. But instead of the teleportation area component, we're using the teleportation anchor component, and everything else we do the same. We can even put the custom reticle in there if we want. You don't have to. And then the only difference is that the transform in the teleport anchor transform is the location to where you will teleport when you select the teleportation anchor. So in this case, when we point our pointer at the cube, we will see our reticle on the cube. And then when we pull the trigger, we will end up directly on top of the cube. And now you could be even more wild with it and just like put the anchor way over here, and then we point at the cube and we end up over here. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but there might be some application in whatever game you're making. So if I test this right now, we should experience what I just described. Of course, so there's our cube, and if I go like that, and now I'm on the cube. And now I can go back over here and go anywhere on here, but no matter where I select on the cube, I always end up on the top of the cube because we're using the teleportation anchor. All right, so that's basically the deal with teleportation. It's very simple. Now, does anybody have any questions, first of all, on teleportation?
And it's also a good time to ask more like abstract questions, like when you would want to use it, if you're curious of like the differences between methods, the pluses, the minuses, stuff like that. Any question at all?
Yeah. Just got one other quick thing to go over after this.
I've got a question, and this might be out of scope for this little tutorial, which has been great. Lots of cool things I have learned. There's one game I have played where they had teleportation, but instead of being like a straight line, it was sort of like an arc from the remote to wherever the destination was. Do you know what I'm talking about, and how
Yes.
easy is that to implement?
I have not tried that, but so basically the way teleportation works is on the hand controller. This is a little bit of what I'm going to get into now, just anyway, but we have the XR ray interactor, and this is the pointer thing, and it works with the line renderer and the XR interactor line visual. So basically what you'd want to do in that case is find a way to, oh, we have line types. Oh, here we go. I just changed it from straight line to projectile curve.
For those of you who are new to this, you don't understand how much easier this was, or
Yes.
this was like 4 years ago. But
Now, I'm going to admit right now I have not tried any of these options that I'm looking at right here, but if we tried Bezier curve, let's find out what that does. That might do exactly what you're describing. Okay, it doesn't look much different, but I think if we play around with that enough, we will find something like what you're describing. I'm sure it's not that difficult. But yeah, so and are there any other questions? Let me look at the chat. I can't really see the chat right now. All right, if not, then I'll go over the last thing I want to mention here. So yeah, whenever we run the screen, the scene, we notice we have these pointers. We have like rays that we're casting up from our hands, and then that's how we can summon objects to our hands from great distances. And that's great for a lot of things, but for other things, not so great. For example, not in every game, sometimes you don't want the player to be able to grab things from all the way across the room, right? So in the case where you want them to just like pick things off the ground, off the table, and no further, just like literally what's in arm's reach, we're gonna have to do some changes to the hand controllers. So in this case, I'll leave that left hand controller alone. I'll just do the right hand so that we can compare. But yeah, so the reason we have, like I said before when I was talking to Brian, is the reason we have the beam is because of this XR ray interactor. We're using a ray, and a ray is a line that goes straight in space until it hits something, basically originating from your hand. So we're just going to get rid of that because we don't want, that's not the kind of interaction we want. And with that, the line renderer, that's the actual like lasers type of thing we're seeing. We're not going to want that either. However, if I try to get rid of that first, it's going to say you can't remove that because this other script depends on it. So we got to remove the other script first, which is the thing that handles the line renderer for the ray interactor. So I'm just going to remove this and then remove the line renderer. And now we just have the Baron XR controller. So it's not really going to do much right now unless we add the XR direct interactor. So what this is we interact with things with our hands, not a laser that originates from our hands. But for this to work, we also need one other thing, and that is a collider on our controller. So in this case, I'm going to use a sphere collider, which I think makes the most sense for this sort of thing. And right now it's pretty big, so I'm going to shrink that down to like 0.25 maybe. And we're also going to make this a trigger. And the reason we're making it a trigger is because otherwise, if it's just a collider on your hand, you're just going to knock away anything you touch. So the trigger allows objects to enter its area, but it still can tell when they've entered the area. but it just doesn't like physically act on them. So you don't push things away when you try to pick them up. And with that, one other thing to note is that since we got rid of the line render and everything, there's no indication as to where our hand is in space. Like, because it's your hand, but you can't see it, so it's a little bit jarring. So an easy thing to do is just, in our case, we actually have the sphere here already we made for the reticle, and we can actually just drag that in. So what we're going to do is make it a child of the hand controller. So we're not going to add anything on here for it, but it's just going to follow the hand's transform. And maybe I'll shrink that down a little bit more. So I'll do 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. And that'll represent my right hand. So if I play this now, as you can see, my hand is now a pink sphere. Oh, and also this is now working. I don't know why it wasn't last time I tried it, but yeah, there's your art, Brian.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, I did not expect that. Oh, that's very easy to use. But yeah, so now we have our hand, and so as you can see, I can't point at things, which makes sense because it's a hand. You don't really want to. So if I can teleport myself close enough to this gun, I can still pick up the gun. And yes, there's some issues with the gun's transform, but the point is we can pick it up and I can still shoot at it just like you'd expect. And so yeah. But yeah, so yeah, that's basically the gist of the two types of interactions. They can both basically do the same thing, except you have the options to be able to point with the ray interactor, obviously, which can be helpful for some things, but you don't always want that, and that's why we have the direct interactor, which is a little bit more realistic. Yeah, so anybody have any questions on that? That's basically the end of what we were going to go over today.